Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on Porch Time today. Thank y'all for joining me. Grab you a chair, pull up, get you something to drink. Guys, this one here, I've been working on this Porch Time for almost 2 weeks now. I did not want to do it, but it's one of those things the good Lord told me that you got to do it because there's somebody out there that needs it, possibly even me. And it's a hard one for me to do. That's why it's such a big deal, and it's called. I guess we're gonna put a topic on it. It's gonna be making it through the hard times, because that seems to be where a lot of people fail, even at homesteading, and fail at life, is making it through the hard times. And guys, it gets to be tough sometimes. Now there are two things in life, I'll say this, that are probably the hardest on anyone, both physically, mentally, psychologically, however you want to say it, financially, all these things. That is divorce and the loss of a spouse or the loss of a child. Let me say that. These are things, I've faced all of these. It's a hard hole to climb out of sometimes, and I know of many people, let me say this, that never recover from one of these three things. And as a rule of thumb, most people find it very, very hard to ever recover from a divorce. They find it very hard to ever recover from the loss of a loved one, especially a spouse, or the loss of a child. It takes a special anointing from God, if you want to be able to get beyond these things. Now, I've been through divorce. I've lost a spouse. My spouse had 3 of her kids killed in a car accident at one time. So all these things, I've seen in my life and in my marriages, and they're very humbling things to happen. They're things that really can wear on you, both physically, mentally, and financially. And I could go on with this. I'm not saying these are the only 3 things that there is, guys. I mean, there's cancer. I went through cancer, 6 years of cancer with my wife. Cancer broke me financially. Let me say that. So there are things that happen in life that really take its toll on you. And I know if y'all hear the animals in the background over this mic, it's feeding time, and I'm trying to get this done before I go out and do feeding this morning and try to get involved in everything. So, but guys, look, there is hope, and that's what I wanted to try to tell y'all today, is there's hope. And, when you go through a divorce, sometimes divorce is not that hard on a person because both parties want out. And both are so tired that they just want to be free. And you can go through a divorce and it really isn't that hard on you. But then there's those cases where you go through a divorce and it's only one party that wants the divorce. The other party still loves the one, but the other one doesn't love that person anymore. And you have that tremendous heart-wrenching hurt that is almost impossible to get over. Now, the person who wants the divorce and is willing to just walk away, usually they go on with their life and they could care less about you because that's where they're at in life. It's the one that was still truly in love that ends up getting hurt and finds it the most difficult to climb out of that pit that they're in. And let me say this, guys. I don't care who you are. You cannot make someone else love you if they don't. As hard as that sounds, You can try to do all the right things. I mean, you know, you can try to do all the right things. But if that person don't love you, they just don't love you anymore. And it doesn't matter to them. And a lot of this depends on people's temperaments now. And depending on which one of the 4 basic temperaments you have the most traits of. You know, if you're a choleric temperament, going through a divorce, you're going to be a very angry person, and you're going to just walk away with anger, and you know, and you're going to probably recover because their temperaments are the type that recover really quick. But if you happen to be a melancholic or a phlegmatic temperament, going through a divorce, you're probably going to be devastated. You know, it's just, you have to understand those things, that why some people seem to soar through things like divorces and others seem to get bogged down in them. Now, it's never anything easy financially to climb out of, because there's usually debt involved. I went through that, you know, because I had a vehicle involved, I had land involved in my divorce, and there's things called binding contracts that you can't redo unless you're willing to refinance it yourself and take a loss, and usually that just puts you deeper in the hole. And then there's just, you know, there's this thing, let's just sell everything and let's just try to make a clean start. I mean, there's just lots of things, guys, that people, when you go through a divorce, that you have to face. And if you happen to have kids, you know, that can be horrendous there. Because even in my divorce, and I don't mind being transparent about it, I had kids, and I just walked away from everything simply because I did not want to put my kids through a divorce court. I just did an uncontested and just walked away. Now, I lost tremendously, but to me, the peace of knowing that my kids were not drugged into a court setting was worth it to me, to lose everything. Because guys, look, it's all material anyway. We're not, you know, like the old adage goes, I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer. Well, you know, you can't take it with you, and don't fret about it. But you know, when I went through my divorce, I had to pick myself back up, because at 41 years old, everything I owned was paid for except a truck. My home was paid for, my land was paid for, except I will say this, the piece of property I live on now was not paid for, but all my other land was paid for. And I was basically out of debt except for 2 little small notes. And when I went through a divorce, I ended up with absolutely nothing but the debt of this land and the truck payment. I had nowhere to live, had nothing. I gave it all away. And as a result, you know, I moved over here, and within, I'll say within 3 months, I was already almost $200,000 back deep in debt again. Guys, I was almost $200,000 deep in debt again. And, you know, I had a mobile home put in, septic tanks, and all this kind of stuff. When you have this kind of stuff done, the debt comes back. But you know what? 7 years later, I climbed out of it, because I made myself a promise that I would not get bogged down in this, and that I would not stop, that I would keep going. And guys, it paid off. I kept a positive attitude, and I moved forward. Now, that's not going to happen to everybody, and I understand that. But that's okay, just simply because you can't take things with you when you leave here. So there's no need in fretting about a lot of it, you know. There's going to always be that hurt, yes. And we're always going to have that kind of stuff that's going to bother us. It's never going to be easy going through divorces. But you know, there's some things that hurt as bad or worse than a divorce, and that's the loss of a spouse. Now, when I married my wife that passed away, she lost 3 kids in a car accident. And she kept telling me, Danny, you just don't understand. And I didn't understand until after we were married. There are some things, guys, that that's just hard to talk about, but yet I'm going to try. There could never things like Christmas programs, cartoons, The Lion King, children's birthdays, parties, all these things never could be in my home because they brought back too many horrifying memories of the loss of 3 children in a car accident. And for 10 years I lived through this, and I saw the hurt and the devastation that it did to someone's life when they lost children. I saw the breaking down of the health. I saw the endless nights of just sitting and crying, wanting to be able to hold that child again, picking up their clothes, remembering the scent of their bodies. All these things, I witnessed and watched all this stuff. And guys, it was just heart-wrenching to sit and watch this as my wife would go through these emotional times. And, you know, and one asks themselves, God, why? Why did this have to happen? You know, and probably this side of heaven we'll never know. But there's one thing I'll say about her. We created a PowerPoint program, and we went from churches to churches, and I presented the PowerPoint program while she got up and spoke about the loss of her children, and she dealt with the 7 stages of grief that a person goes through when they lose someone that's very close to them. And we were able to take that message and help a lot of people through a lot of hard times. And God used that. So that was God's, you know, part of the plan, I'm pretty sure. But you know, that wouldn't even be the end of it. Then soon she would come down with cancer. And she would battle cancer for 6 years on and off. And I would say, God, you know, the loss of the children and now cancer, really? You know? And there was a period of time in there where even I lost my faith in believing that, you know, that God was even good. And I have to admit this. These were hard times. I didn't know these hard times were coming. My faith was shaken to the core as I sit and watched not only her dealing with the loss of her kids and the grief that she went through with that, but then having to battle cancer. And guys, in the cancer, literally, I owned the businesses, and I had to shut them down, literally, to take care of her and to be able to provide for her. And then when you shut your companies down, there's no income coming in. And what I had saved in savings and all, cancer quickly took that away. And in the end, it took her life. And, you know, there I was dealing with a hard time. Not only with just having gone through a divorce several years earlier, rebuilding completely. I had paid my place off. It was feeling real good. Me and her figured we'd have a life, you know, doing all this. And then she passes away with cancer, and I'm left here with this place all alone. And guys, when you've been married your whole life, adult life, let me say, and then all of a sudden you're left alone, that's pretty devastating. Thankfully, I learned how to cook. Thankfully, I learned how to clean a house and take care of myself, take care of lots of things. I mean, she did well at teaching me all these things because she knew what it was like to be on the other side of loss. And even at her deathbed, she would sit and tell me, Danny, you're going to face this. The people who are your friends will no longer be your friends anymore, because not because they don't like you, it's because they don't know what to say when they're around you anymore. And therefore, they will just gradually fade away out of your life. And your church family will fade away out of your life. A lot of them will. You'll probably end up having to change churches, which I did. There's going to be all these things that are going to happen to you, and it's nothing that's your fault. It's just that people are uneasy when they're around you because they don't know what to say or they don't know how to say it. And she said, you will make a whole new group of friends, and these will be your friends. And guys, everything happened just like she told me. And it was comforting to know these things ahead of time rather than having to just experience them and try to figure them out on my own. But at the same time, there was that emptiness and there was that loneliness that I desired companionship. And I've spent several years after my wife passed away by myself, and the loneliness that goes along with it is just the quietness. You know, some people, the scripture teaches us that some people, God steps in and He meets their needs to the point where they don't need a spouse anymore because God meets their needs. But there are those that God wants to have companionship and He won't meet their needs. And I happen to be one of those that needed companionship, and I always thought that I would live by myself for the rest of my life. Well, when I quickly learned 4 months later after her passing that my heart gave out on me and I ended up in emergency room, and you know, did grief play a part in that? I'm sure, because I was basically diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and I was diagnosed with a broken heart. It's a real diagnosis. And the two of them played a tremendous part on me, not only physically, mentally, psychologically. I had problems on driving because of the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I would black out while I was driving, and they took my keys away from me, told me no more driving because you're going to have a bad wreck. Maybe kill yourself or kill somebody else. So for years I didn't drive. I'm back driving now because I got tired of not driving. I don't like driving. I would rather someone else drive, but there's physical issues now that I have to deal with. You know, guys, these are the hard times I'm talking about. People talk about building homesteads, and I want to move way away from anybody. I want to just get out in the middle of nowhere, you know, so nobody can bother me. I can have my own peace and quiet. I can just be my own person. Well, that's good. But let me tell you something. Along with that will come, sometimes tragedies can happen. There can be the loss of loved ones. There can be the loss of spouses. The other person can say, you know what, I'm just tired of living off out here by ourselves. We don't never do nothing. We never go nowhere. And you know, ends up going through a divorce because of just differences in personalities. Some people just can't help themselves. They have to be going. And then you have some people who, like myself, don't really care if I ever go anywhere because I've done all the wrong thing in life I ever want to do. I've been all over the place and done all kinds of things, so I don't care anymore if I go anywhere. And then you have those differences in personalities, and they can lead to a divorce. And then when that happens, then you know, there you are way off out in the middle of nowhere by yourself. If an accident happens, you know, these are hard times, guys, that you have to learn to get beyond. And no one is immune. That's one thing we have to understand, that nobody is immune to these hard times. They can happen to anybody, anytime, anywhere. Don't ever think at one moment that you're above it, because the scripture teaches us that nobody's promised tomorrow. Today could be your last day. Nobody knows when their last day will be. It can be heart-wrenching at times. And when I see people that are going through divorces and stuff like that, I have friends right now who are going through divorces, friends on YouTube who are going through divorces. And I'm anxiously sitting back waiting to see how well they cope, you know, and how well they rebuild. And it encourages me when I see communities step in and pull in together and actually help the people. Because see, I went through 6 years. I had no family help from anybody taking care of my wife. No one to sit with her. No one to do anything with my wife. There was a couple of weeks, I'll say, my sister came in and done a little cleaning in the house and helped out there. Had a couple of meals cooked at one time by someone. But as far as taking us to the doctor, you know, every day that she had to go and all this kind of stuff, my sister helped a couple of times. But other than that, none of her family helped at all. and I was just by myself. That's why I had to shut my company down, because I had to be home to take care of her. And that's what I'm telling you, that when things like these kind of tragedies strike, it can be extremely devastating to a person. And it's amazing how that life works and how things affect us, because we think we're like superhuman, you know, and we're immune to these things. Oh, they will never bother me. But guys, I was always said to be one of the most cold-hearted people that there was. And it's not that I was cold-hearted at all. I just didn't show emotions. I grew up in an age where young men were taught not to show emotions. You don't cry. You don't do these things. And it was all held within me. And I dealt with it on my own, in my own time. And God was good to me. And I will say this, the first time I ever cried is when my heart messed up. And now I have a heart condition because of it. And if I get the least bit emotional now, my heart goes out of rhythm. All this kind of stuff happens. And sometimes I think maybe there's wisdom in telling people or training people how to deal with their emotions. I know I learned a tremendous lot doing the PowerPoint programs and dealing with grief and stuff like this. I learned a lot through that, which helped me, you know, get through some of my problems, because there's all these stages, and sometimes in life you have to be careful that you don't get hung up on some of these stages. You know, some people get angry, so that's one of the stages, you know, and you can get hung up on that anger and be angry for years and years and years, and it does nobody any good. It's actually destroying you. And then, you know, there can be the loneliness, and there's all these stages that a person deals with, and it's up to you to determine how you're going to deal with them and how long you're going to stay in them. And each one of these phases is perfectly normal. But and let me say, not to have no reaction at all to something when it happens is also a reaction, and it's perfectly normal. That's what's wrong with a lot of our guys when they come out of the military, or a lot of our police officers and different things like this, because when they get out of their line of work, they're never really debriefed, and it comes back later in life to haunt you. So, you know, guys, I know that today this has been very difficult. It's been difficult for me, because when I do this, I have to go back and I have to relive the thoughts in order to talk about it, and it's not something that I like doing. But God would not leave me alone about this today. But what I want to tell you is, there is hope. You can recover. You can do better. You can get out of the hole you're in. I did. God was good to me. God gave me a new spouse. He gave me Ms. Wanda. Because you see, at 50-something years old, when I lost my spouse, I did not think that anyone would ever be interested in marrying a man who now had a physical condition, had shut his company down, had no income, and had been through a divorce, had been through the loss of a spouse, and, you know, just, guys, I was hesitant about telling anybody what I owned or how much I was worth or anything, because I didn't want somebody marrying me for what I had. And even Wanda, when I met her, Wanda never knew what I owned until she actually came to my house several weeks after we met. And when it's amazing how that when she stepped out of the car when she first got here, because I'd made in my mind up, I'm not going looking for a spouse. I told God, I said, I'm just not going to do it. I said, if there's a lady in my life, you're going to have to bring her to me, because I'm not going looking. Because I've had 2 bad tragedies in my life, and I made the decision on both of them. And if I'm to have another lady in my life, then you'll have to make that decision for me. And God brought Wanda to me, literally. I have to say, He brought her to me. And when she stepped out of that car, I knew instantly that I was in love with this lady. And I knew that God had put her there. And guys, yes, Wanda and I have our differences. We do not see eye to eye on everything. But that's okay, because that's who we are. We agree to disagree. We don't argue. We don't fuss. We don't fight. We try to come together to find common ground on anything that we do. And we try not to ever make a decision without consulting the other one. And make sure they're okay with it. Because you see, guys, Wanda, just like me, had been through a lot of heartache. And she really did not know if she really didn't even want to get married, and neither did I. But it just seemed that God put us together, and He just made it happen. And I feel like the most blessed man on the face of the earth right now, you know, because I have a spouse that I can love. And let me say something. This is going to seem a little hard, but it's not intended to be hard. It's the truth. When you love someone and you lose someone, whether it's through divorce or whether it's through death, that love can never be replaced. No one will ever take that place. There can never be that same love again. When you re-love someone and you find a new relationship, you must find new ground to love someone on. You can't always be comparing someone to past experiences. You must look forward, and you must look for the new common ground that you and the person that you've fallen for have. They can never take the other person's place, and you have to understand that. So don't ever try to make someone that you want to have a relationship take the other person's place, because that cannot happen. It is impossible, because they'll never meet the expectations of the other person. And they always feel like they're having to live up to someone else's standards. That's not fair to them, and that's not fair to you. The other person is gone. That's something I had to learn. I had a very dear friend of mine. We were sitting down talking in a conversation. I had been through counseling after I lost my wife and everything. Even though I was a counselor for years, I needed counseling. And finally, it was a female friend of mine. She just looked at me one day and she said, "Danny, would you just shut up and sit down and listen to me?" And I was like, I said, "What? What have I done to make you mad?" She said, "There is no we, there is no us, there's just you. You're not married anymore. Your wife has passed away. Your other wife is gone. It's just you. You're single again. Get over it and move forward." And guys, that shook me to my core. Because everything I said we and us and stuff like that, using those words. And it was at that point that I realized that the power of speech in a relationship and the power that it can have over your life. And I thanked her, because no matter how much Christian counseling I went through, the counselor did me absolutely no good, because everything he told me I already knew, because I've done it before. But this one young lady, who was actually a millennial, let me say that, is the one who shook me to my core and made me understand that I had to move forward. And I'm not trying to be harsh today, guys. I've lived this, so I'm not talking about something I don't know what I'm talking about. I've lived through this. And as a result, I've married a beautiful woman now, Miss Wanda. And we have a great relationship. And it gets better all the time. I look forward to spending the rest of my life with her. You know, now will I? Who knows what life will throw at us, whether but I do look forward to spending the rest of my life with Ms. Wanda, because I truly feel honored and blessed to have her in my life. And Everything I do on a daily basis is basically geared towards, should something happen to me, I want her to be taken care of. That is probably my greatest desire in life right now. I build my whole homestead based around her. And should something happen to her, or should something happen to me, each one of us, at least we won't be having it as hard as we could have. Let me say that. Now there'll still be those phases, there'll still be those losses, those griefs, and things like that that you'll have to deal with. But as a whole, I'm trying to set everything up where we can be taken care of. Let me put it that way. Because that's what love does. Love always gives. Love never asks for anything in return. True love never asks for anything back. It always gives. And guys, that's the point I want to get across to you today is dealing with hard times. Remember, love always gives. It never asks for anything in return. So I know that Porch Time today has probably not been one of those upbeat things, but it's something God laid on my heart, and it's something I felt like it had to be done because God would not leave me alone. I've been dealing with this almost 2 weeks now. And because He told me, He said, Danny, there's somebody out there who needs this, and you got to do it. So guys, I've done it for y'all, and I hope that it's been a blessing to you. Thank you from Deep South Homestead.